How are we keeping, everyone? Hope all is well. Today's today's guest is the brilliant and amazing comedian all the way from Wales, Steffan Alun. He's a presenter, actor, bilingual, and bisexual professional Welsh comedian. He's absolutely brilliant. You're gonna love him. Let's see what Stefan's all about.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you
Brilliant.
for coming on, Stefan. So, uh,
You take to the other chair and you don't buy it.
yeah,
I don't have a webcam on my computer, so I'll be audio only if that's okay.
yeah, that's fine. Where are you based at the moment, Stefan?
I am in Swansea in Wales.
Oh, okay. So that is Southwest Wales, if I believe, right?
It is, yeah, sort of, yeah. I think of it as more sort of south central, I suppose, because West Wales has such a strong identity of its own, and I don't think Swansea quite counts.
Okay. And so is it a bit like LA, South Central Wales? It's the part.
But yeah, that's how I like to think of it. Swansea's funny. It's a city, but operates much more like a large town. It's, you know, Cardiff it operates like a small city by UK standards. Swansea doesn't really. But it is probably the cheapest place in the UK that you can live that still has a direct train to London.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Oh, all right. That's and is it a quick train or is it a slow?
Yeah. It's really nice train. First Great Western, loads of carriages. Yeah, I recommend it.
Is it a quick one so you could get
It
in?
is it is. Yeah.
Okay, that's nice. So you can gig a lot in London as well as in Swansea. You could double.
Yes. I gig all over. Such as the nature of stand-up comedy. I I don't know. London is weird in that because there are so many comedians there, it's not a great place to gig if what you want is to make money, but it is obviously very helpful in terms of building your connections with the rest of the industry.
Yeah. I heard
So I
that.
do gig there whenever I can.
I heard that from Tom. What's his name? Tom Little. Yeah, he says to me, and he said to me this last year. He said,
Mm,
if you want to get famous on TV, it's actually more important to live in London to gig rather than
yes.
going up to the Edinburgh Fringe.
Yes, Tom Little is right, with the possible caveat that if you're a Welsh speaker, there is also a thriving television industry in Cardiff where you are better off living in Wales, probably.
Oh, okay, really? That's interesting.
So I've just finished shooting a children's TV show, which is in Welsh language, and I don't know. I mean, it's interesting that I got that job through, indirectly through Edinburgh, really. But I think you do have to play on the circuit proper, even to sort of make headway in the industry in Wales. But there are options open to you in Wales. You can sort of build a little, a lucrative and like career for yourself, like not just in Welsh language, actually. BBC Wales has its headquarters in Cardiff. They've got this massive new building, so that has created a lot of opportunities. So I do think increasingly you can get sort of media stuff without leaving Wales, but yeah, that's still a growing thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I know that like Adam Rowe is obviously still based in Northwest, and you got Susie McCabe, and they got in the Apollo.
Yes, absolutely. And I do think there's more of an attempt to get people more regional acts on Apollo. Ignacio Lopez did Apollo 2 years ago, I want to say, and he's not the first Welsh act to do Apollo, but he's the first one who was living in Wales when he did it. Ignatius always been based in Wales, still is. And that feels like a big step forward because, on the circuit, people have known that Ignatius is amazing for years. But, you know, there's always, I feel like from his side, he never wanted to sort of go to London and play the game that way. And he hasn't needed to because I think the industry's catching up a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's very interesting to hear. Yeah, I love doing this podcast. So many different podcasts.
Have we started?
You know what? This was meant to be the pre-chat, but I think we've had a good flow, haven't we, so far already?
I reckon so.
So yeah, I think we will start. It's got a good flow.
Here we
I
go.
feel like it's Mozart at the moment. Quick little question. Did you listen to any of the previous episodes?
Yes, I did, but I did that when you got in touch with me, so it's been a few weeks now.
Okay, which episode did you listen to?
I can check. I can find out myself. Let's have a look. It would have been, I imagine, whichever was the most recent episode that had a friend of mine in it. I imagine. Let's see where I can find it. Oh gosh, sorry. Remind me of the name of this podcast.
The Comedian's Paradise.
Oh yes, I can see your logo, Comedian's Paradise. Sorry, I suppose you don't even need to know this information really, but I thought I'd check it for you. I think. Oh, did I listen to this? Maybe I did. It doesn't look like any of my episodes are marked. No, so I think what I did was I scanned the titles
Okay.
and got the vibe of it that way. I'm sure. God, you've done loads, haven't you? Well done.
Too many. It's good. I mean, I've got it helps with getting some clips out there in terms of the quantity. I mean, I've got. Do you use any video apps for the short clips? Because I use Opus Pro, which works quite well. So, anyone else use that?
Good tip. I've not been a huge fan of short clips really. I'm on TikTok, but usually I use that for sort of more kind of direct. I'll record something on my way back from a gig or whatever, and like I haven't really put up many like short clips because I don't think that's not really the route of comedy that I enjoy. That sort of, build up an incredibly wide audience of people who loved like tiny little bits you've done and build up an audience that way. I do realize there's an element of importance in that, but I think I've always preferred, I have full 20s online. My plan is to have my full Edinburgh shows online. And then for short clips, that can just be more kind of direct stuff, which I feel is correct for me. I think there's some comics who are, whose style suits that kind of real-based comedy a lot more.
Yeah, the ones that are good with crowd work.
Well, yes.
No, it's. I think it's a necessary evil. I like it a lot. I know that some people say, "Oh, social media is this, social media that," but I think it's a necessary evil at the moment, especially with it makes things less in control of someone else. And if you learn how to be good at social media and you are legitimately good, you don't need other people as much to make a good living from comedy.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
It saves so many people. I mean, Jeff Innocent, we keep talking about, has changed his sort of career in a way because now he's got a big following and he doesn't really need the gatekeepers to make him famous anymore because he's already got a big following.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a little bit more cynical about the change than that. I don't think the internet is allowing you to bypass gatekeepers so much as it is giving you the option that if you want to do every single bloody thing towards producing a piece of entertainment, you can do. So it's like, hey, do you want to get on TV or do you want to make an entire TV show off your own back for free? like, although yes, it provides an advantage to accessibility, I do think, we're also like, I think it's a bit sad that we're losing the more sort of collaborative, well-funded model that we had before. And hey, if you make enough money, and if you're Adam Rowe and you can throw money at a good production, cool, I suppose. But all that means is it's the comedians who've managed to make the most money out of social media who'll be able to produce the best television. So it hasn't really, I think people talk about it as if it's this big revolution and suddenly we're going to hear voices who couldn't get on TV and suddenly they'll be able to make it big on the internet. But that's still only true if they can amass a big following, and that will continue to reward a certain type of comedian. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that the vast majority of comedians who've done incredibly well out of the revolution are straight white men. And that's not, that's not me criticizing any of those individuals. And it's not like the point is, when there's no gatekeepers, there's no one to petition for diversity. There's no one to petition for variety. So I think there are massive downsides to this modern model.
Okay. It, but okay. What? So
Sorry, I didn't mean to knock you off your perch.
I don't mind. It's all good. I think we all need it now and then. No. What would you say? So you're saying that you're you're saying that it doesn't it promotes, as you said, just straight white male. Why would you?
Well, no, it doesn't, because it isn't. It doesn't have an agency. It's not a thing, right? It's not a person. That's just what happens in an unregulated market. Like, if you on television can if you think that there is value in a diverse range of comedy from a diverse range of people, and comedy is made by people, is made by producers, commissioned by commissioners. You can petition those commissioners and producers. You can put pressure on them to provide that diversity, even if it isn't the most financially rewarding thing. Like, with no pressure, commissioners are just going to commission the most popular stuff. Like, when the TV charter was weakened, ITV started making less drama and more like talent shows because they get more viewers. And I think we like living in a country where sometimes you get a TV show that isn't necessarily going to be the biggest crowd pleaser, but the people who love it will love it a lot. And I think that's what I like about comedy. A lot of my favorite comedy is sort of quite niche. I think very few comedians, if you ask them who their favorite comedians are, will pick Michael McIntyre, John Bishop, Sarah Millican, even though those are great comedians. But most of us will love the people who are so niche that it's like only in a supported arts environment would those people have been able to produce work that reached my eyes and ears. So I think that's the problem with social media, is that it's unregulated. There's no way of saying to Twitter, hey, why not promote diverse voices? Not least of all because it's owned by a person who will say no to that.
I think Elon Musk would definitely say no. Yes, definitely. I am Elon Musk. No, I'm joking.
What a twist.
I get called that occasionally on the stage, but then when I say to others, they say, no, you don't look like Elon Musk. I get different looks. Some people say I look like Will from The In-Betweeners with glasses. Some say I look like the guy who'd flying the Concords. But I think they've got a prejudice against someone wearing glasses.
Yeah, quite right.
No, it was an interesting point you made. Because I know that there's a few on the flip side of that, like Marcelo Cont's doing okay socially. Well, he already got on TV in a way, but then the President Abunja is doing quite well on social media.
Absolutely. There are, yeah. I mean, I am not saying that the only people who've ever been successful on the internet are straight white men. There are plenty of exceptions, not just in comedy. But it is the nature of this thing that, like, if you say, okay, you can be successful as long as you're willing to do absolutely everything. Like, as long as you like, if you're going to make videos, you need to learn how to light yourself properly. You need to learn sound technology. You need to, like, you need to learn all this stuff, because until you're successful, you won't have the money to spend on this unless you have a day job. So all the problems that we complain about with the circuit are, I would say, even worse online, where it's like you get most rewarded if you are independently wealthy and have loads of free time.
That is 100% true. Oh yes, yes.
And what used to happen is that, like, and it still happens to a certain extent, that an agent can spot you if you manage to just about make your way to the right gigs. An agent can spot you and sign you and give you a lot of gigs, and like that can still happen. Meeting the right person at the right time can drastically change your fortunes. Like, that's what it takes, really. Like, it's very hard to be truly self-made. Like, even if it's just, hey, this one really prestigious club started booking me, and therefore independent bookers are more likely to book me now because my CV is better. Brilliant. But you got to be able to put yourself in that position in the first place. And what's increasingly happening is that, the reason it disproportionately rewards straight white men is just because the average person on TikTok is less likely to skip their videos. We live in a world that is increasingly, people have curated a disgust. Like, there are people who see a woman and go doing stand up and immediately go skip next on their TikTok. And you can't do that in a club. If you've gone to a comedy club, you've got to watch the entire set, and that act may well win you over. They probably will do, right? Like, we know that by the time you get to a professional club, you've proved yourself to be of a particular standard. So you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I mean, obviously, I have a horse in this race. I talk about being bisexual on stage. And if I do that, with 20 minutes in a club, even though some people in the audience might go, oh, I don't want to hear about this. Tough. You're here. What you're going to do? You're going to leave. And so I will just be funny enough and interesting enough to prove, oh, actually, like, he can talk about that stuff and he's still really funny. Great, fine. And I think this kind of algorithm skip to the next video world is worse for comedy and is worse for the individuals doing it, even though certain people will be able to game the system and have a great career out of it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But, yeah, no, you're 100% right about that. And I think in this, what you said here as well, I think whatever your situation is in comedy, you've got to find a way that, it's a thing that's always been said in the UK scene. If you haven't got the money, it's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to say about that, but when you do make it, if you've had obstacles, I'm guessing the feeling's a lot better, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think, like, I've never taken the most obvious path through stand-up, and I find what I've built very rewarding. So, yeah, I mean, but I suppose what I think is that, like, some obstacles are natural and will always be a feature of life, and other obstacles are sort of manufactured by the shape of the platforms we use to promote ourselves. And those ones can be changed, and I think we should demand change.
Now, one thing that you said that was very interesting, I know that you said that you're bisexual and some audiences, they have to listen to it. What you said there was quite interesting, because I had another guest on the podcast called Lady Bushra. They're, what's it called? They are a drag act. And they said their story of growing up in a South Asian background, and them, like, people being offended against them being gay and all those other things, and them growing up in a religious background, he was able to relate to people from Alabama who'd had that experience, and Mormons, because even though they're in a different background, there's elements of his story that they can relate to. With your story of being bisexual, I'm sure there's bits of it when you do your set that people in the crowd, even though they're not that way inclined, there's things about your story that they can relate to. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of my job is to work out what those things are. Like, if I was a playwright in a theatre, I could write a play that was incredibly specific and went into details about my life that are very different from anyone else's. and because that's the form. But stand-up comedy is all about relatability. So it's all about making people laugh by mirroring their own experiences back to them. Which I think is great, actually. There's plenty of sad LGBT art out there for people who want that stuff. And I think I quite like being able to sort of bring a more joyful, celebratory side of it. And I'm not the only person doing that. There's plenty of really happy queer joy gets used a lot as a phrase. But there is something really nice about, if I've performed to 500 people, most of whom are straight, it's still very nice when an LGBT person comes up to me at the end of the show to like say hi and to say they particularly related. And actually the most special thing for me is if someone comes and says that they're straight, but they have a child who's gay and they're watching my comedy helps them understand that their child a bit more. I think that's a really great thing that comedy can do is it helps you understand other people in your life.
I've heard this not just because I've interviewed clowns and other kind of creatives on this platform. I've heard that a lot of them say that the solution, not the solution, part of what makes what they do great is truth. What would you say your opinion of that when you're doing your setters?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, depending on what truth means. I mean, yeah, I think you are always looking for finding the way that you look at the world, finding what is valuable and what can be shared that people would enjoy. And stand-up comedy is nice because often it's simply enough to step on stage and say, I had this experience, because other people who've had that experience go, oh yeah, me too. So I think it has to feel truthful. You can change certain details and sometimes you have to. But I think your core observation of the world has to be something you earnestly believe. Although I'm sure there are disingenuous comedians who just say whatever they need to say to get laughs and the approval of the audience. But I think I like being honest and being open, even if it's stuff the audience doesn't agree with sometimes. I think showing people that there is no danger. Hey, yeah, if I say something and you don't go with it, that's okay too. Like that shouldn't be risky.
Have you had a moment on stage where because I've heard about this from a comic friend of mine, Julius Harry, said a story about in the Comedy Store, there's a few audience members who were a little bit homophobic to Larry Dean, but he said that he was so good at what he did, he was able to get them on board and really create a hilarious and brilliant moment because of that. Have you had a moment yourself where you've had people that are a bit on that spectrum?
No, I haven't.
And you changed them around on stage?
So, no, I haven't had someone... I've never had someone shout something homophobic out. And I think probably the difference between me and Larry is that, when he gets on stage, he is so clearly an effeminate man. He owns his sexuality. There's do you know the phrase passing privilege?
What's that?
The idea is that you can pass as someone who isn't gay, that you can pass as someone who isn't queer. So I think when I first get on stage, even though I feel there are things about me that are sort of effeminate and there's a campness to me that I think is kind of linked to my sexuality, but a lot of comedians are kind of camp anyway, even straight ones. So I think what happens is I go on stage and I'm granted, like, people will just accept me as I am for the first few minutes, and I can choose when to bring my sexuality into it, if at all. I would always start by sort of saying hi. I'd probably start by talking about where I'm from, because I think that is more interesting to audiences, and they'll hear a Welsh accent, they'll want that addressed first. So by the time I go into my sexuality, usually the audience has already decided they like me. Which that can sound like arrogance, but like, it's my job to make them like me, and I've been doing that job a long time, so I'm quite good at it. What I have had in the past is occasionally I might mention something about like a trans person in my act. I've got a lot of trans friends, so not to make a political point of it, but like sometimes that might come up. And I have had people come up to me at the end of gigs to say something transphobic specifically, and my feeling is that people think they're allowed to be transphobic, but I think people don't generally think they're allowed to be homophobic, or at least not to my face.
Oh, okay.
Um, so I don't know. I think when I get heckled, I've been heckled for being Welsh because it's the first thing I say on stage. And yes, of course, it is your job to turn that into a moment and to like make that a thing. The only time I've had someone be incredibly rude to me, no, it has happened a few times actually. And like at that point, I think it is your job to go big and to win and to be like, if you've said something that rude to me, I am now allowed to be rude to you because you started it. And I think that can create a really like exciting and memorable moment in the room. And I think what you're doing is you're demonstrating that like we shouldn't actually you can stand up to bullies. Like if someone says something rude to you, even if they're doing it in this pompous tone. I had a very posh person once heckle me with like, you know, I was telling a joke about someone I know, and this person heckled, "That person sounds more interesting than you." The implication being that that I'm being really boring, and so like I just took a moment, like that's the meanest I've ever been to a heckler was how rude I was to that person. But it was this person who thinks that because they're posh, they can go around saying stuff like that. They can call people boring. They can have a go at people, and no one says anything to them. But hey, I've got a microphone and the lights are on me, and I'm on a big stage. Like this is not a fair fight, and you've now shown me that you deserve to be made a fool of.
And do you address that when you get that moment, do you look at the character weakness that causes them to be like that?
Oh, I don't know, really. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think I'm generally guided by principles, and be kind, be compassionate. But the main thing is that you have to be aware of the comfort of the audience. Going too hard against someone can make the audience feel uncomfortable. But on this occasion, she'd made the rest of the audience uncomfortable by saying something so rude. Usually, when someone heckles, the rest of the audience is on your side, not the heckler's side. And so I think what you do is you put the audience's comfort first. They're not going to be comfortable until this person has been put in their place. So sometimes you don't want to address a heckle because it's like it's a pain and you just want to do your set. But you kind of have to address the heckler because otherwise the rest of the audience won't have the best time they can have.
Okay, yeah. Do you occasionally ignore it, or no? I mean, sometimes you ignore it, but for the comfort of the audience. But how? Never mind. Yeah, you just got to gauge what, and you obviously make mistakes, and you see. Yeah, that's the game, isn't it? We don't always read the room well.
Yeah, I think like to be good at comedy isn't just to practice your lines and get stage time. It's also to become a better human and become a better person and become better at talking to people. I think every conversation with a stranger is an opportunity to practice the skill of connecting with a human being because that is a skill you need on stage. I think when I'm heckled, it generally goes quite well, but that is because I've learned how to talk to people and I've thought a lot about it. And I think, yeah, like it's not obvious, but like if you find it hard to make small talk with the person at the checkout in your supermarket, that's actually a problem that needs solving if you want to be a comedian, because you ought to be able to have a conversation for most part, right? Like, I mean, if you're a one-liner comic who never MCs, no worries. But if you are someone who has crowd work as part of your act, then really you ought to be able to make a conversation with anyone, in my opinion.
Yeah, and how much of comedy is being Dr. Malfi from The Sopranos?
I don't know that reference.
Okay, so how much of because this is a thing that I've had from the brilliant and the amazing what's her name again? I can't believe I've forgotten this. But she's absolutely terrific comedian. She hosts a lot of shows up and down the country. She's a great stand-up. Begins with M. She used to run a lot of gigs for Women in Comedy as well. What's her name again? Can't believe I've forgotten this. She's been doing it for over 10 years. She speaks German as well. Austrian German. Let me check. There is host and one second. But she I can't believe. Yeah, it's on the spot. But there was this great comment out on the podcast about a year and a bit ago. She says that a lot of psychology is based on psychology. How important? How? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. I think when you're new, you think that it's just a case of writing the best jokes and delivering it in the best way, but there is no one correct way to deliver your jokes, and there is no joke so well written that it will always work. So I think the skill you need is that ability to make something happen in the room, to be the most charismatic version of yourself and provide a performance that works for the audience you've got. And an audience that is up for it and excited to watch comedy is a very different room to a suspicious audience that, sometimes you'll do a gig and you turn up and the room isn't set up correctly and the venue's not quite as nice as you'd hoped. And so the audience come in and they're like, oh God, is this going to be awful? And entertaining those people requires you to perform in a slightly different way. So yeah, the quicker you can work that out and work out what makes a person tick and what mood they're likely to be in. Like it's imagining what kind of day they're having. Your day is you've just been on a train for 6 hours or whatever, and you're in a city you don't know. But these people, their experience is they live here, they work here, and they're here with their partners, and maybe they've had to arrange childcare, and maybe they've been looking forward to this gig for ages, and like, you've got to appreciate the world they're coming from. Like, I did a gig recently, Birmingham Glee, brilliant gig, and it was a Saturday night, and the acts were finding the audience sort of surprisingly quiet for a Saturday. Their logic being, come on, it's Saturday, I'm expecting an up for it crowd. But I was emceeing, so I could talk to the crowd a bit and find out what was up. And it was this. Yes, it's Saturday, but for most people, that's not a day off. It's the day where you have to do all the chores you can't do when you're in work. So actually, a lot of these people had worked harder that day than they would have worked on a Friday night. Because Friday, you go to work, you sit at your desk, you do whatever, you do your job, but your job's relatively straightforward. It's very familiar. Whereas on a Saturday, maybe you had to call a plumber and take your kid to football practice and you needed to make a cake for your wife's birthday, whatever, like all those specific jobs that you have to remember how to do every time you do it. So yeah, I think the better you understand the way people tick, the better your gigs will go.
And what's your thoughts on how a character act or some of these alternative acts address the psychology of use this? I know this is what a lot of straight stand-ups do. No, not straight. What am I using straight? Like people that are stand-up, writing stories or gags do. But what about sort of mad character acts? How do they apply this method?
It's a good question, and I don't know really. My guess is that you have a sense of duality, and that you have the character that you're playing on stage who will react in a certain way to certain situations, but that also you on the inside continue to exist, analyzing the situation and thinking about what to do next, which to a certain extent is what a straightforward stand-up does as well. The person you're playing on stage is a slightly different version of you. And you're pretending to be really calm and chill and just talking off the top of your head, but of course on the inside your brain is going at 1,000 miles an hour, calculating all the different things you could say and all the directions you could go. So my guess is that it's not super different, but you'd have to ask a character act, of course, really.
Okay, so I personally myself, I think a lot of comedians on the UK circuit hear it a lot. You hear a lot of people that go to Goliath, and they've done the clown course there. And I think this is something that I also heard that was so similar to a cabaret act, and that the main focus is to always be in the room. But it sounds so basic. But in the Goliath school, what we used to do, we used to play games on stage to generate material. And one of the key things is, like Philip Goliath says, whatever idea you have before you go on stage is shit. And you find out the comedy through, there's a game, there is a structure. You don't go in completely blank, but they give you an exercise and you play a game. It's not fully structured, but you find out what's good through playing the game on stage and playing with the audience and figuring out what works. And I think in some ways that's what happens with stand-up. You have a structure, you have jokes, but often what a lot of stand-ups do is they find out what really works with that joke, and it's often a surprise. Maybe it's just the setup that gets the big laugh rather than the joke itself. I think in the process is similar, but also slightly different. It's just stand-ups use words. A lot of clowns, they use their movements.
Yeah, and I think probably a lesson one has to learn as a stand-up is that game is necessary. I think, for years when I was new, I would write. I was a very prolific writer. I would write loads and loads of material and try loads of stuff out. And every time I did, I would become a little bit better. Not necessarily because the new material was better, but new material is like helping me practice different skill sets. And so I would get gradually better. And then I hit a bit of a ceiling after a few years. And, I had a Club 20. I was doing paid gigs. I was doing quite good gigs. But it was one of those things where you go and you have a gig and it goes fine, but no one's in a hurry to book you back because it was fine. It wasn't amazing. It was just fine. And I worked so hard to try and write myself out of that corner, thinking, okay, clearly this is my best material, but it's not good enough. And maybe I need even better material. And eventually I realized actually what was holding me back wasn't the material. It was the way I was selling it, and it was finding that game, and it was using my face correctly, and it was using the stage and using my body and all those things which like lift a comedy set and lift a joke. And now I see it in a lot of younger comics. I can see a lot of comedians who are where I was back then, where they're fine. They've got a great set, like great material, but what's holding them back is that they just stand there and deliver it in one mood. And, the only emotion they will have on stage is jolly. Whereas actually, like, a good comedy set will give you opportunities to be angry or frustrated or outraged or delighted, and to act out all those emotions and moods, and to, really weave a narrative and a story, and let emotions are much funnier than a written joke. And I think people connect more to a person who's animated and interesting on stage. So I think stand-up comedy can trick you into thinking you don't need to play that game that you describe. But you definitely do need to. You need to find that precise way of delivering it.
And especially in the big clubs, isn't it? The more difficult rooms. That is
Yeah, I mean, big clubs require big emotion and big use of stage. And I think for a comedian, most comedians who start in the UK will start performing in very small rooms, function rooms in pubs, cellars, and such. And when you make that transition into the big clubs, yeah, come on, it's a big stage. You've got to use it, and you've got a big audience. If you do a gig to 50 people in 20 minutes, you can basically memorize all 20 faces. You've got a sense, or 50 faces, sorry. You've got a sense of who's in. In a big club, like you can't look everyone in the eye and make every single person a part of that show. So you have to go bigger. And you can see that like the most successful comedians in the UK are the ones who make huge use of that stage. Michael McIntyre's famous for skipping about the stage. Lee Evans, of course, everyone names Lee Evans as one of their favorite comedians. Someone like Bill Bailey, or Tim Minchin, do it with music. Music allows you to fill that stage and fill that space much more efficiently than stand-up comedy can. Jack Whitehall is fascinating because I think when people imagine Jack Whitehall in their heads, they think of someone like standing at the mic being all posh. But you watch one of his shows, he flings himself across that stage. The choreography of his work is why he can fill stadiums.
And there are people that I know in the public that criticize Jack White. They say, "Oh, he's not that funny, he's not that great." But on the stand-up circuit, and Hills Jaeger, I mean, she's not. It doesn't run Muse anymore. But she always used to say she knew he was good from the start, and people don't often see what qualities some of these great comics have. And
Well, when people say he's not funny, that's usually code for I don't like it. And that's fine. You don't have to like every individual comedian. But your job as a comedian is to make an entire room of people laugh. And that requires us playing the gig in a particular way. But that doesn't mean it works if you watch a recording of it. So I think a lot of people, taxi drivers who pick me up from gigs will always give an opinion on which comedian they don't find funny. And I just think,
yes.
Go and watch a show of theirs. You will laugh because you just will, because that person will be able to make you laugh because they have that skill set, because they're experts in it. And, obviously you can be stubborn enough not to laugh, right? And I have been in rooms where very successful comedians have not made me laugh very much, because obviously I've got my own snobbish opinions on comedy. But that doesn't mean you can't learn from them. I think especially if you're a new comedian starting out, there is no value in looking at Jack Whitehall and saying he's not funny, so there's nothing I can learn from him. It's like, well, actually, if you don't find him funny, the fact is he's still monstrously successful. So there probably is something you can learn from him. So steal what he does well, apply it to your own act, and become famous with something that you like doing instead. That's the answer to that.
Yeah. And how much would you say watching a great stand-up will teach you more so than watching on video?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, accessibility is tricky. It's easier to watch a video. And it's also, there are advantages to a video, right? Because you can slow it down, you can watch it repeatedly, you can skip back and forth. So there are things you can do with a video. You can study it in a way that it's hard to study live stand-up because you see it once and then that's it. Unless it's an act that you see repeatedly do the same set, which there's value in that. But yeah, I think asking yourself, the most powerful thing you can do is perform at a gig and then stick around and watch the headliner and see what an experienced act does with exactly the same audience you've just played, because they will do things and you'll go, and that still happens to me now, that I do a gig that goes, yeah, okay, but it could have gone better. And then I watch the headliner who just says one line at the start that makes me go, that's what I should have done. I should have said that, or I should have said something a bit like it. So yeah, I see as much live stuff as you possibly can.
From what you've said there's a bit that I've had from, I interviewed the brilliant actor who's been going for ages. Do you know Keith Platt or Howard Smith?
No, I don't.
He's been going since 1994, and one of the things that he said, following on from similar to what you've said, is that what he does before he goes on stage, he says, the minute you get on stage, people are judging you. And if you that first gag, he says that if you do your first gag on stage, people are judging you a lot from that. And he says that once, when he goes up on stage, the first thing he does, he doesn't do a joke. He observes the room and he finds a way to connect with the room. Like he'll mention, I don't know, some chandelier looking completely odd, or something that's happened in the room that everyone can relate to, and they go, "Oh yeah, we noticed that." And then he goes into a set.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I mean, I think we all worry about our first joke. You want that first joke to be hilarious to win them over. But actually, the truth is, you need to win them over before you've made your first joke for a truly great gig. You need to come out and for them to immediately think, yep, this guy looks funny. And that can be very, very hard to do. And a lot of that is to do with confidence. And again, it's why, when Michael McIntyre comes out on stage, he's over the top and skipping and sort of making noises. So before he's even done a joke, we think, yep, this is a clown. This guy's gonna make us laugh. So yeah, the other thing you're doing is you're trying to reinforce the idea. Like when stand-up goes brilliantly, it's because you've managed to trick a room full of people to think that they're just having an intimate chat with their funniest friend. And so by making a joke about the room, you're proving that you're capable of being funny in the moment. You're not just reliant on stories you've told a million times before.
Yeah. Another thing I definitely couldn't do is go to a gong show and do that. That's something I couldn't do.
I did a bunch of gong shows when I was not when I was brand new. Actually, I did them in order to learn how to do comedy clubs. I used to do Up the Creek's gong show, because getting stage time in those rooms is really hard. But without stage time, you can't learn it. And so I did. I said to myself, I'm going to do this gong show until I can consistently nail this room. And actually, I did it 3 times, and that was enough. Actually, all the work I'd done in smaller clubs, all I really needed was just to figure out. You just need to figure out how to start. Once you've started, you're okay in a big club. And so gong shows, the advantage they have is you get to practice coming out and looking funny. And even if they gong you off straight away, which they never did at Up the Creek allows you 2 minutes grace. It's not like the Comedy Store one. But yeah, it just gives you that chance to get used to coming out and introducing yourself and getting the audience in the palm of your hand from the start. Gong shows are really horrible, so I don't blame anyone for not doing them. And if they look like they'll crush your soul, yeah, you don't have to do them. But I found value in them.
Yeah. What has been your most memorable thing you've seen at a gong show? Because a lot of people say that the Comedy Store, a lot of people don't know about gigs, so they do their first gig, and you see mad things. Like I remember seeing one actually put a condom on his head, and they were waiting. They were willing to give him 30 or 40 seconds more just to watch him take it off.
Yeah, there's stuff like that. I mean, after a while, you've probably seen every version of what a mad first gig can look like. So that's genre one, is go on and do something mad, because that'll be funny in its own right. And of course, if if you have clowning experience and training, then maybe you can make that funny, but actually probably not. The second thing is taking something on stage that you never address. I think a lot of people, when they're new to comedy, think oh, that'd be really funny. But actually, stand-up is weird, right? Your job as a stand-up is not to do things that are funny. Your job is to make people laugh. So if it's not making them laugh, it actually doesn't matter if the idea is sort of intrinsically funny. So I remember once doing a gig, a new material night, and there was a guy doing his first ever gig, and he came on stage with a shopping trolley, and then did 10 minutes of material, and then left with the shopping trolley, which he'd never mentioned, not once. And so we tell that story a lot, the people who were at that gig, because, oh my God, we love the fact that there was no lift in that place, and the gig was on the first floor. So he had to get a shopping trolley up a flight of stairs, which none of us witnessed, but he must have. So, that's kind of fascinating and an interesting story. But in the room, it's not worth it, because not once did the presence of that trolley lead to laughter.
Oh. Yeah. It's yeah.
Now, maybe you can, once you're an experienced act, you have a skill set that means you can do that sort of thing. So maybe halfway, I can imagine a really good act turning up on stage with a shopping trolley, putting it to one side, and then 5 minutes into the set going, I'm never going to mention the trolley, by the way. And then that'll get a big laugh. And then whatever you say next gets a laugh because you change the subject, and then you leave with the trolley. So like you know, so I can imagine a good act getting one great laugh out of something like that. But if you genuinely never mention it, the audience is just going to be a bit baffled. And even if they find it funny in retrospect, like, you know, your job is to make them laugh.
Yeah.
But I say all that, I kind of have a lot of time for that kind of thing. Like, I like people who take risks and like do something really weird just to see if it works. And so like I would never criticize someone for going on stage and putting a condom on their head and seeing what happens. Even though I think you're probably better off planning something a little bit more in detail than that.
No, it was interesting. Some of the things with the Gong Show are completely mad, aren't they? I mean, I remember one girl who's an American girl, attractive looking. As soon as she mentioned she had a boyfriend, she got gonged off.
Ah, yeah. Well, so my logic is that a gong show, and I don't want to assume that your audience knows what a gong show is. I don't know who is it. Mostly new comedians who listen to this.
I would say so. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so like, so a traditional gong show, your fate is in the hands of maybe 3 audience members who, you know, this is how the Comedy Store does it, or did in my day. 3 members of the audience are given like a red card, and if all 3 red cards are raised, you get gonged off. And so what that means is, like, the audience watches the show, a bit like you listen to a compilation album you've just bought, in the sense that you know that you can skip at any point. So like if a song grabs you and is absolutely incredible, you will listen to the whole thing. But if a song is pretty good, but only pretty good, you might skip it anyway, just because you're like, yeah, okay, I get it. So very good acts can get gonged off simply by, like, I remember when I did I did the Comedy Store Gong Show once. I went with a friend and I beat the gong and he didn't. But I really think that's our position on the bill. He was a better act than me for sure. But he was on 3rd and I was on, I don't know, 18th. And he got gonged off after about 3.5 minutes. And I think he was doing okay, but he was only the 3rd on and people were like, oh, come on, let's get on with it. Whereas by the time I got on, it was coming towards the end of the night. So, I'm not playing down my achievement. I still had to be good enough to play quite a combative room. But if I'd gone on 3rd, I wouldn't have gone through. So there's an element of chance to it as well.
Yeah. Well, now, yeah, it's what you make of it in regards to gong shows. What are your thoughts on the Edinburgh Fringe? Because I've interviewed a few comedians on podcasts, and I'm going to put up the episode that I had with Peter Buckley-Hill in a couple of weeks, which I found quite intriguing. I didn't ask him any of the questions about Laughing Horse because I know that he's had that loads and loads of times before. But he said something. What did he say about it? Yeah, he's and Luke Meredith as well. They say that with the Fringe itself. The criticism they had on it was that so many people now go in with the pay-to-play model thinking they're going to make it, and what they say is if you want to build an audience or if you want to get better, that's why the free Fringe is great. But with the pay-to-play models paying 5,000 per venue, I mean, you're going to get reviews and all that, but reviews don't carry as much weight as they used to. And your chances of being discovered or that are becoming less and less if you're going in with that aim.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you've got to know what you want to get out of Edinburgh if you're going to do it. I love Edinburgh. I've done it. I've done 8 full runs at Edinburgh, and I'm currently working on my next show to go back again next year. I just love it, but if you don't love it, you've got to ask yourself why you're doing it. So my goals when I started doing Edinburgh was I wanted to improve as an act. I wanted to build my networks a bit and meet more people in the industry. I wanted to hone the material that I had. I wanted to be able to get into clubs, and so doing Edinburgh was a good way of like really honing club material. And all of those things happened for me, you know. Um, I think I've always met my goals really, and then there's sort of nebulous goals where you hope something more comes of it. And yes, I've also had Edinburghs where something more has come from it. But I think having really fixed goals that are in your control is the way to play Edinburgh. And also, my God, do your research. You know, don't just like don't just apply for a venue and say yes to the first offer you get and then go with like a flyer you've designed yourself. Like ask around, like work out how to do it properly, because there are some miserable rooms to play in that are wrong for your act, and you won't know that until you get there. Don't assume that because something's a venue that you'll have a nice time there. Some venues are very far out of town, which makes it very hard to attract an audience. And there is so much competition. You're up against everyone. Don't go there if your flyer's not good. Don't go there without flyers. Don't, you know, like have a PR plan. Free Fringe is brilliant, by the way. You know, and for so many people who couldn't afford to go there on the pay to play model, as Peter would put it, the Free Fringe is a great option. But bear in mind that you're up against, even on the Free Fringe itself has hundreds of shows. You're up against so much competition. Standing out among the other free shows, let alone every other show in the festival, is tough. And so learning how to do that is very good character building, but don't assume you'll be able to pick it up right away. My advice to anyone going up for the first time is to do a split show with a friend. Do that as a Free Fringe show. So that you've got a buddy, maybe a few friends. You know, one of my friends, the first time he did Edinburgh, went up with 3 different people. So they were all doing, 10 to 15 minutes each. And that's the show. That's the way to do it the first time, because then you get used to the festival and you'll be prepared. Like never debut on your first time in that festival, because it's so overwhelming. Taking a full solo show the first time you go is a recipe for a stressful month and bad mental health.
Yeah. Do you have any horror stories to share? No, I'm joking.
Do you know what? So, I mean, no, I'm willing to tell you, talk about it. I've been very lucky. Again, I think because I was slow to go up there and did a lot of research. I've never had a horrible run at all. But that isn't to say that I haven't had tough shows, and like especially early on, the first time I took a solo show up, you'd do a show, maybe 2 people come, or maybe no one comes. I had to cancel a show because no one came, and oh God, it just makes you feel so sad. And it's you talk to other people and you find out that everyone's had that show. That some people have had shows where they've performed to one person, and like, they all tell you the same advice, which is just keep coming back and keep producing good stuff. And yeah, like it just works. And so, yeah, I'm very lucky. Like God knows, I've had worse horror stories like on the circuit than I have in Edinburgh, to be honest. But again, part of that is I'm good at making sensible choices about my Edinburgh run.
Good. Now, people say, "Oh, we learn from experiences," but one thing that I think sometimes we don't do enough is we learn from other people's stupid mistakes. And what examples have you learned from others on the circuit in terms of the Fringe and on the circuit? And what?
Oh, that's it. You're asking me to say what stupid things have people done that you would never do?
Oh,
Have I? Yeah, have I? Yeah, you do, of course, but I don't know if any particularly come to mind. I think you build this database of like countless stupid things other people have done and think, yeah, probably don't do that. I think any material that is mean to the audience, that makes them uncomfortable, don't do that. Oversharing without great punchlines. Sometimes I think comedians get rewarded for honesty, and that makes us think we should share our most sort of traumatizing, upsetting pieces of backstory. No, not at all. Like, you should only ever be sharing stuff that you're okay with and that the punchline is funny enough to justify sharing. Don't don't gamble on comedy. Like not, or at least like don't gamble anything you can't afford to lose. Like it's the same as regular gambling, right? Like if you go to a casino and you decide, all right, I'm gonna spend 50 quid on chips, and if I lose them all, so be it. I'm here to have fun. Okay, no one can blame you. But if you go in and you think, I can't afford to spend 50 quid, but I'm going to because I'm determined to make my fortune, and then you lose it all, and then you're weeping to yourself at home. You played it wrong. You should never have done that. Don't ever risk something you can't afford to risk, and that goes for comedy as well. So if you want to be in the Pleasance and you want to spend 10 grand on your run and you want to hire a director and a street team of flyers and a PR person, like, okay, can you afford that? And if the answer is only if I become so famous afterwards that the work I get will cover those expenses, then don't do it. Don't risk money that you don't have. Don't get yourself into debt unless you know you can get yourself out of it comfortably.
Yeah. It's well, in regards to what's it called, stupid things that I would never do. I cannot answer that at stage personally from experience. I've done some things that question myself. But
Oh,
um,
me too, for sure.
yeah, that is definitely a great bit of advice, and I hear that especially. I see a lot of that happen at the Fringe. Yeah, don't put all your
And it
eggs.
happens on a local level as well, right? Like where you go, oh, there's an open spot in Mansfield and it's 150 quid on the train to get there, but I'm going to do it because you got to do it. And it's like, is it? Like that might be worth it, but are you sure? And it depends. If you're wealthy and 150 quid is nothing to you, then fine. But if 150 quid means you can't eat, really think it through. Like maybe you can spend that money in like better elsewhere. Um, like Edinburgh is an obvious place where you can waste a lot of money that you should spend more wisely. But there's all sorts of areas in life where that can happen.
Yeah. Is the circuit becoming more and more less like that? Because I know I spoke to, I really want to get him on the podcast, but Alexander Bennett, I did a
Ah, yeah.
chat with him, and he's incredible, like insightful guy to talk to on the train
He
back.
is.
He said that the circuit itself is becoming more separated in a way because of the cost of travel.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Alexander is very, very wise, and that I agree with that completely. Um, yeah, I think like I disproportionately gig in cities where I have somewhere to stay, where like I have friends and family, and I'm lucky to have a lot of friends in a lot of different cities. But there are gigs I don't bother. It's been about 3 years since I've applied for anything that's ever happened in Norwich. Just because I don't know any, and I could just about get back to London, but if I'm going to go back to London, I might as well just gig in London. Yeah, I definitely think the idea of like I do it, like my business model is I travel where the gigs are. I'm constantly on trains. I'm constantly going to every part of the country to gig, but fewer and fewer people do what I do. A lot more people do just sort of build their comedy in the area where they live, and they don't travel too far. They don't go to other areas. But it depends what you want to achieve and what type of comedy you want to do. And for me, I want to be able to make anyone laugh, and that means performing in front of every type of audience, including international audiences if you can. But certainly you should be gigging in as many areas as possible if that is important to you. But again, it's increasingly expensive. Fuel is expensive, transport's expensive, hotels are expensive.
Yeah. And well, I mean, things are getting harder, so we also got to find a creative way around that. I know
And
that,
also, it's harder for everyone, right? Like the cost of living is increasing so much, fewer people go to gigs, and that means there's less money in the pot in the first place. Fewer gigs, paying less well.
yeah. And but what you said there, that's been a problem that's going on for 30 years in the UK comedy circuit, or in comedy in general,
Yes.
probably. But I know in the UK that what you said there has been going on for years.
Yeah. And it is still the UK is still easier to gig in than almost any other country in the world because there's a lot of gigs quite closely packed together. A small population, or rather a large population for how small the country is. And you can generally get anywhere. If I leave at 9 in the morning, I can get to Edinburgh in time for a gig. So I could pick up a last minute gig in York and just go to York because public transport is still that good in this country, even though we complain about it and even though it's expensive. Um, so like it could be an awful lot worse, but I think like there was a time where transport was cheap, living, you could rent wasn't bad and hotels were cheap. So in the 90s, if one promoter liked you, you could probably quit your job immediately. Whereas now, you can be someone who sometimes does like 8 out of 10 cats and mock the week, and you still have to temp because you're still not quite making enough money to meet the costs of living in, London. So yeah, I think when you read the stories of like comedians who came of age in the 90s, don't feel bad if you're not experiencing the same level of success because that level of success probably doesn't really exist anymore.
Only for a few. James Acaster's one of them, isn't he?
Well, James Acaster will have like definitely struggled financially at times. Like James Acaster did not have it as easy as any comedian who started 10 years before him. He is tremendously successful now, but he had to struggle and do his time on the circuit as well.
Yeah, we've got to pay our dues. Now, how what advice do you have? Sorry, what is one thing you would say to comedians, whether they be new? Actually, no, I've asked this question a few times, so I'm going to rephrase it. What advice would you offer to comedians that have been going for a while and aren't quite where they want to be?
Okay, I would say to yourself, work out why you aren't where you want to be. And that might mean talking to your peers. Make friends. My God, like that's a big problem. I think a lot of comedians, when they're brand new, make a lot of friends on the open mic circuit. And then 10 years, 15 years later, they're on the circuit and their friends are just the people they started with who haven't quit yet. They're friendly with loads of comedians, but they don't have friends, proper friends that you can sort of open up to about the struggles. So find people who love you and who are open to conversation with you. Someone who'll pick up the phone when you want to complain about a gig, or who'll give you advice when you look for it. So with those people, find out why you aren't where you want to be. Is it because there are experiences you want to have and you haven't yet? If so, what are those experiences? And if those experiences are, oh, I want a Netflix special, ask yourself why you want a Netflix special. Do you want that because you want the experience of producing an hour of filmed comedy in front of a live audience? Because if so, you can do that yourself. Like, it's hard, but don't wait for Netflix. Like, work on that now. Do you have a show that's an hour long that's good enough? If not, start writing it. And once you have, call in your favors that you no doubt will know people who can handle a camera and who can handle sound equipment. Call in those favors, or pay for them to provide their services. But if the reason you want a Netflix special isn't because you want the product, but because you want the status that Netflix special implies, then you don't want a Netflix special. What you want is a feeling. And if you're not happy now, the Netflix special won't make you happy anyway. Because most people with a Netflix special, no one watches the special. There's loads of stand-up specials on Netflix. How many can you actually name?
Not many.
So you get a Netflix special and you think, brilliant, now I can be happy. And then you go, oh, actually, I'm not happy because no one's watching it. I'm not James Acaster. Why am I not in the new Ghostbusters? If you're not happy now, you never will be happy. So, like, you've got to work out what makes you happy. And it is, I promise it isn't status. I feel I feel no happier today than I did as an open micer in terms of my status. I mean, I'm very thrilled to have a following and I love my followers. I love the people who come and see my work. I love them to bits. They bring me so much joy. But my relationship to my own status is no better or worse. Maybe it's better actually because I've sort of grown to be more zen about it. But I don't feel successful because I don't think anyone feels successful. So you've got to work out what makes you happy instead. And I am happy with what I produce. I'm an artist, so I'm happy when I've produced something good. And if it's good enough, my following will like it as well. And strangers will like it as well. And people will find it. And so every year I produce a new piece of work. That's why I keep going back to Edinburgh, because that's what makes me happy. It's producing. And that's my advice to someone who's not happy with where they are. That's my first piece of advice, is like, work out why you're not happy. And if it's because you're not happy with your status, make your peace with your status. Because Ricky Gervais is not happy with his status. Ricky Gervais is so successful and he's unhappy. He wishes more people liked him because there's still people who hate him on the internet. And he's obsessed with that and he can't get over it. Like, he is so rich and his reach is so broad, but he is as insecure as an open micer who can't get his first paid 20. So, like, your level of success will not make you happy. Like, being happy makes you happy. And so work out how that works, right? Like, work out what makes people happy. So a big thing you can do is when you meet comedians who seem happy, ask them why. Like, ask them what makes them happy. And get used to that, I think. Like, I love talking to happy comedians and figuring out why they're like that. Like Rob Deering and Craig Hill. These people have been doing it for such a long time and don't hate it yet. Great. And like, the answer is usually because they live a very full life. They're not only doing stand-up, they're also, make sure you have other hobbies. Like, I spend time with my wife spending a day with my wife and like going to do an escape room and having a pub lunch and like watching telly at the end of the night will do so much more for my career than, I don't know, like going to some soul destroying networking event where everyone wants to talk to someone more influential than you. Because that night spent like cultivating my own joy and happiness makes the job more fun. It's like, because you don't take it for granted and it's part of a fulfilling life. Like, no stranger's love is going to make you as happy as the love of your friends. Like, if gigging isn't making you happy, then maybe you need to talk to your mother, give her a ring, maybe you need to talk to your kids a bit more and like, or like reach out to that old friend that you keep meaning to meet up but you never do because you're too busy gigging. So like, having a full life, I think, is so okay. What's on my list? Work out what you want to achieve, and if it's status, make your peace with the fact that status doesn't make you happy. Make time for the people in your life, have hobbies and loved ones that exist outside of stand-up. And I think my third piece of advice is like, just become better at comedy. Like, you've probably stopped thinking that way because you're good enough. And so you've stopped bothering to improve. Remember that when you first did comedy, the first time you did a gig, you probably spent ages writing that set and ages rehearsing it, going over those lines. You were probably so nervous. Whereas now you go on stage and you just do the 20 you've done 1,000 times before. You're not nervous. You're just bored and you can't wait to get back on the road and get home and, get a takeaway. Like, challenge yourself to be better. Why aren't you better? There are definitely comedians better than you. Watch them, work out what they're doing, and learn how to do that yourself. Learn how to use your face more. Learn how to use the stage more. Learn how to make yourself memorable. Loads of comedians are good enough to make people laugh for 20 minutes. How many comedians are good enough that audience still remembers them the next day, the next week, the next year?
Yeah,
that's the point.
Yeah,
and there are answers to that, and it's tapping into things other than the words that you're saying. It's partly, it is material. It's sharing something valuable, but a lot of it is like being the funniest version of yourself, which is probably in the way that you move and the way that you talk and the way that your face moves. So hopefully there's something in that somewhere for someone.
And for anyone that is listening right now, and they're like, Steffan, he's a great guy. I want to pay him for services. I want to know about him. I want to watch his shows, whatever they may want to do. Where do they find out about you?
I would like you to find me on Blue Sky or Instagram at Steffan Alun. That is Steffan. Alun, Alun. Blue Sky, I'm particularly into Blue Sky, so if that's where you get your updates, I will definitely keep promoting my shows there. But I do try and remember to update Instagram as well, and I know more people are on Instagram.
Okay. So, guys, anyone that's listening, you know where to go. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next episode. The next episode is likely to be, and I'm just confirming it, with an Australian comic and who is a bogan. So I'm going to find out about bogans and comedy. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys soon.